Welcome everyone to another edition of the Classic Comic Archive, a series where I recap and review many of Marvel Comics' most seminal early issues. Our story for today is Uncanny X-Men Issue 1 from September of 1963. This issue marks the first appearance of the X-Men, as well as their arch-nemesis Magneto. The issue was written by Stan Lee, drawn by Jack Kirby, inked by Paul Reinman, and lettered by Sam Rosen. Our story begins with a lone man sitting motionless within the study of an upstate New York mansion. Without opening his mouth, the man telepathically summons a group of young students. He is Charles Xavier, but perhaps better known as Professor X, and the mansion he resides in is actually a private school for some of the world's most exceptional teenagers. Arriving for their lesson in matching costumes are four codenamed students. They identify themselves as Cyclops, the Angel, Iceman, and the Beast. Together they are known as the X-Men. It's obvious that these students aren't attending a traditional school, as we soon learn that each one of them possesses a unique superpower. The Iceman, as his name would imply, can manipulate the cold, an ability he demonstrates on the Beast's arm, freezing it solid. Yet the Beast's limbs are overgrown and ape-like, a trait that gives him super strength and agility. Easily breaking free of Iceman's prank, the Beast complains of its ice-cold sting, but Iceman thinks his classmate is just being a crybaby. The Beast doesn't take kindly to the remark and revs up to give Iceman a piece of his mind. Luckily the Angel, whose power is flight, intervenes and is able to corral the two bickering teenagers as they start their lesson. Professor X mentally commands the last student, known as Cyclops, to activate a training machine, and for the Beast to complete an obstacle course specifically tailored to his ape-like powers. The Beast perfectly traverses the course, as he performs acrobatic feats greater than any normal athlete. Although he does stumble slightly on a balance test. Nonetheless, the Beast finishes his trial with astonishing speed, as the Angel prepares to complete his own tailored course. Professor X mentally warns the Angel of the dire need for precision and perfection, as his course is particularly hazardous. Yet the Angel brushes off the warning, as he claims mistakes are reserved for Homo sapiens. Our first clue that this odd group may not be fully human. The Angel confidently begins the course, but quickly finds that Professor X wasn't bluffing, as the prideful teenager nearly singes his wings on an unexpected plume of flame. Being more cautious from then on, the Angel is next able to avoid a mechanical crusher and fly through a spinning spanner, evidently the first time he was able to complete such a maneuver perfectly. Yet the Angel is still unprepared for a sudden blast of sonic energy, which sends him careening towards the ground. Luckily, the Angel is narrowly able to regain control of his wings and save himself from a harsh impact, which Professor X commends him for. With the Angel's test complete, Iceman speaks out and complains that his courses are never as daring or exciting as those of his peers. Evidently the Iceman is actually a few years younger than his classmates, and isn't mature enough to test his powers in such dangerous situations. Professor X tells the Iceman as much, but allows him 5 minutes to explore his abilities freely without any obstacles. Yet the Iceman resents being treated like a kid, and childishly decides that he'll act like one to spite his teacher and amuse his classmates. But the Iceman forgets that just as Professor X can speak to minds, he can also read them. If only to indulge his restless student's desire for excitement, the professor mentally commands the Beast to grab a nearby bowling ball and stand ready to test the Iceman's reflexes. Just as the Iceman poses as a cartoonish snowman, the Beast powerfully hurls the bowling ball his way. Yet the Iceman's reflexes are as sharp as any's, as he quickly creates a sturdy ice shield that deflects the bowling ball back towards his classmate. The Beast catches the bowling ball and jokes with the Iceman that with how precise his deflection was, he ought to challenge the Harlem Globetrotters to a game of basketball. Yet Cyclops, the only student yet to complete a trial, rebukes the Beast and Iceman for how close they came to hitting the professor, who by this point we can tell is not mobile. Evidently the professor agrees with Cyclops' sentiment, as he commands the student to neutralize the Beast and Iceman without causing any serious injury, as apparently this is his test. Thus we learn that Cyclops possesses the ability to produce powerful optic beams, which he concentrates through his visor. The obedient student uses this ability to blast the Beast with a torrent of energy, enough that the lumbering teenager is sent crashing into a wall. At this point Iceman has become wise to the professor's plan, and encases himself within a thick cube of protective ice. Cyclops increases the intensity of his beams, and begins blasting the Iceman's shield. Within a matter of seconds the shield crumbles away, exposing a defenseless Iceman who is quickly blasted himself and sent flying across the room. Yet Cyclops' test is not over, as Professor X mentally commands his other 3 X-Men to join forces and subdue the beam-blasting teen. While the 3 students struggle to best Cyclops, Professor X senses a powerful mental disturbance that needs his utmost attention. He orders his X-Men to stop fighting and, speaking normally, tells them that they will soon be in the presence of a young lady. The professor directs his students to a nearby window, where they see a young redhead exit a taxi at the entrance of the mansion. All but Cyclops immediately swoon over her and quickly rush to change into normal clothes. Professor X greets the girl as she enters the school. We learn that she had been mentally compelled to come at the request of Professor X. Yet the professor was seemingly scant on details in his message, as the girl asks him about the nature of his institution. Professor X tells the girl, named Jean Grey, that his school is one for particularly exceptional students, as he only admits mutants, which are people who naturally possess superpowers. The professor then introduces Jean to his other students. We learn that the Beast is really Hank McCoy, the Iceman is Bobby Drake, Cyclops is Scott Summers, and the Angel is Warren Worthington III. The professor then announces that Jean will be known as Marvel Girl. Hank asks Jean what her power is, but the girl responds coyly. Yet Hank and the other X-Men don't need to wait long to find out, as when Hank asks Jean what her power is, but the girl responds coyly. Yet Hank and the other X-Men don't need to wait long to find out, as when Scott motions to retrieve a chair for her, Jean telekinetically draws the chair forward herself. Scott and Hank are both amazed and bewildered at Jean's feat, so at the behest of Professor X she demonstrates further, by levitating a book and flipping through its pages in mid-air. Professor X tells her that from an early age, he's been ostracized because of his powers. It's for this reason he established his school as a safe haven for young mutants, where in secret he trains them to harness their abilities for the betterment of mankind. The professor then briefly leaves, so that Jean can acquaint herself with her new classmates. Yet as soon as he does, the apish Hank leans in on Jean to give her a so-called welcome kiss. Jean doesn't take kindly to Hank's brazen breach of her personal space, and using her mutant powers, lifts the X-Man high in the air, and begins dizzyingly spinning him around. The display gets a good kick out of Jean's more restrained classmates, before she drops Hank down onto a nearby couch. Jean wonders if she's been too harsh on Hank, but Professor X returns, and assures her that his student can take the punishment, as he's used to his rough training as a member of the X-Men. The professor's answer sparks Jean's curiosity, as she asks the visionary, what purpose is there behind the team? Thus the professor reveals that just as there are mutants like themselves who live amongst and appreciate normal humans, there are others who would wish to subjugate and conquer them. It is therefore the X-Men's sworn duty to prevent such a fate and defend humanity from evil mutants. Yet before the professor has a chance to say another word, the issue shifts focus to the secret lair of one such evil mutant, known as Magneto. We see that from miles away, the villain is monitoring the launch of a powerful missile. While the government has taken extensive precautions to protect the weapon, they could never have anticipated Magneto's interference, as only moments after the missile's launch, the evil mutant commands a torrent of magnetic energy to strike the weapon. The blow forces the missile off course and careening back to Earth, but luckily the weapon lands in the ocean and harmlessly explodes. NASA and the military quickly conclude that the missile must have been tampered with, although they have no way of knowing Magneto is the one behind it. News of the missile's failure spreads quickly, as we see it's the main headline of the next day's paper. It's later that afternoon that we witness the full breadth of Magneto's evil plot, as he begins an invasion of the still heavily guarded launch site, by turning the military's weapons against them. As if possessed by ghosts, machine guns and tanks turn on their operators. As the site's bewildered brass prepare to sound an alarm, Magneto magnetizes the air itself and forms a chilling message above their heads. Surrender the base, or I'll take it by force. Yet the installation's commanders are more so confused than frightened, and hesitate to take any action. Magneto isn't pleased with their indecision, and uses his magnetic powers to remotely activate a standby missile. But the villain only forces the weapon to explode in the ocean near an unmanned ship, seemingly as a warning shot. Yet even this display of power does not faze the site's commanders, who order the base be defended from any of the evil mutants' attacks. Making due on his promise, Magneto arrives at the launch site and effortlessly renders the guards' weapons useless. The soldiers then lunge at the villain with just their fists, but Magneto activates an invisible magnetic barrier that repels their attacks. Additional reinforcements then arrive to subdue the magnetic menace, but their effort fails all the same, as the evil mutant tightly crafts an unbreakable magnetic band around the soldiers, trapping them still as he heads to confront the launch site's commanding officer. Finding the officer and several of his guards, Magneto easily subdues them and claims the installation is his, but in the name of mutant kind. The issue then shifts focus back to Professor Xavier's school, where we see Jean Grey alone in her new room trying on her Marvel Girl costume. Except Jean is not alone, as Hank, Bobby, and Warren are ogling at their new teammate from behind a corner. Jean notices the three teenage boys and tells them off for being such creeps, although the ever-smooth Hank tries to claim they were just passing by. Yet any bickering is interrupted by a powerful mental command from Professor X, as he requests the presence of his X-Men immediately. The five teenagers quickly arrive and are told of Magneto's invasion of the launch site, which is actually called Cape Citadel. Thus the X-Men have their work cut out for them, as Professor X commands his team to get ready to leave for Cape Citadel at once. Within a rather expensive Rolls-Royce, the five super teens are driven to a nearby airport, where they board a remote-controlled aircraft, guided by Professor X on the ground. The X-Men arrive at Cape Citadel a short time later, and find it surrounded by the military, who are desperately shelling at the launch site, as Magneto has erected an impenetrable force field around the entire installation. Somehow Cyclops manages to approach a commanding general, and offers the aid of the X-Men in defeating Magneto. The general has obviously never heard of the X-Men, but with seemingly nothing to lose, lets the team through and orders the shelling be ceased. Yet some of the teenagers aren't so graceful on their approach, as Iceman accidentally freezes a soldier's rifle, the Beast plays leapfrog on a soldier's head, and Jean Grey is forced to mentally push her way through a group of soldiers. In any case, Cyclops is the first of the X-Men to arrive at the barrier, and finds some success in blasting away the force field. Turning the intensity of his beams to its highest levels, Cyclops is able to momentarily breach the barrier, which gives his teammates just enough time to pass through. Yet the destruction of his barrier is sensed by Magneto, and he activates 5 heat-seeking missiles to defeat the X-Men. The missiles first target the Angel, who is just barely able to outmaneuver them, but knows he won't be so lucky, as they quickly move to strike again. Yet the winged hero is saved by his teammate Iceman, who lobs several heat-seeking ice grenades towards the missiles, and manages to disable all but one, which continues to pursue the Angel. The Beast takes care of this last missile, as he's able to acrobatically catch and deactivate the weapon with his ape-like feet. Marvel Girl then steps in, and uses her mental powers to harmlessly hurl the missile into the ocean. Watching their feats from afar, Magneto commends the power of the X-Men, yet nonetheless vows to vanquish them. Appearing before the Angel, Magneto is able to subdue the approaching hero by encasing him within a heap of metal junk. Yet he, for the third time now, is saved by one of his teammates. This time it's Cyclops, who destroys the heap with an optic blast and frees the Angel. Yet this was all part of Magneto's ploy to gather the 5 X-Men into one spot, as he next magnetically hurls a canister of flaming rocket fuel towards the heroes. Without any time to flee, Iceman desperately encases him and his teammates in a shield of ice, yet the power of the ensuing explosion seems too great for even the X-Men to bear. With his foes seemingly destroyed, Magneto prepares to continue with his sinister plot. Yet the villain takes but a few steps before a powerful beam crashes through the ground next to him. Evidently the X-Men survived the explosion, and emerge from underneath Magneto's feet to continue their battle with the villain. Yet the evil mutant realizes he's met his match, and uses his magnetic powers to fly away in an astonishing escape. The Angel attempts to pursue Magneto, but the clever villain erects another force field around him and his teammates, giving the menace an opportunity to get away. The X-Men eventually break free of the barrier, and tell the general of their success in defeating Magneto. The grateful officer thanks the X-Men, and promises that their epic display of heroism will be honored under his command. The Angel thanks the general and makes his own promise. If the nation's security ever be threatened again, the X-Men will be steadfast in their defense of all that is good. The issue subsequently ends as the X-Men return to their jet and begin traveling back to the X-Mansion, where Professor Xavier congratulates his students for their victory and thanks them for bringing everyone one step closer to his dream of human-mutant harmony. That concludes Uncanny X-Men Issue 1 and another episode of the Classic Comic Archive. But as always, I would like to offer a brief review of this issue. Overall, I thought that this was another solid story from Marvel. I commend the writers for being able to introduce so many new characters in a single issue, yet still give each a unique personality and power set. Except of course the Angel, who I think I'll be picking on a lot throughout this series. I do have to say that Magneto as a villain felt a little one-note in this issue, although future stories will certainly rectify this. In any case, let me know what you thought of this issue and the video, and feel free to suggest other classic comics for me to cover. Thanks for watching.